Please welcome to the stage the University of Minnesota Interim President, Jeff Ettinger.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. It is my great pleasure to join you today as we discuss two of the most pressing issues of our time, sustainability and climate change. The challenges we face, from environmental degradation to social and economic disparity, require collective action and an unwavering commitment to sustainability practices. For many years, the University of Minnesota has been at the forefront of research, education, and advocacy in the broad field of sustainability system-wide. And here are just a few of the many examples. Our Morris campus, with its 2 wind turbines, Bert and Ernie, many solar arrays, and biomass gasification facilities, embodies sustainability. In 2019, the U of M Morris was ranked as the #1 campus in the United States for the most renewable energy generated on campus per full-time equivalent student by Environmental America. The Institute on the Environment supports breakthrough research across disciplines. It is developing the next generation of global leaders and building transformative partnerships across the state, region, and the globe. And there's the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, involving faculty from here at the Humphrey School. As a University of Minnesota system, we must continue to be part of tangible solutions to sustainability challenges, and we need to help lead these conversations. Events like this are critical, and I'm incredibly grateful to Tom Swain, who I had the great opportunity to see in Morrill Hall a month or two ago, for his call to action and for bringing us this climate policy series. Today, we are very honored to welcome Sanda Ojiambo, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact. Her insight and experience will enhance our understanding of the Sustainable Development Goals, a UN blueprint for global peace and prosperity now and into the future. As a special initiative of the United Nations Secretary General, the UN Global Compact serves as a powerful call to companies worldwide to align their operations and strategies with the 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. With more than 20,000 participating companies, the UN Global Compact stands as the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, uniting businesses in the collective pursuit of a better world. As an alumna of the Humphrey School, Ms. Ojiambo brings a unique perspective shaped by her personal journey and her role at the University of Minnesota. Her commitment to sustainability and her dedication to driving positive change serve as an inspiration to us all. By harnessing the power of collaboration, innovation, and advocacy, we can pave the way for a more sustainable and equitable world. Thank you for your attendance today, and let's begin this important conversation with hope, determination, and a steadfast commitment to sustainability. It is now my pleasure to welcome the Dean of the Humphrey School, Nisha Bochwe, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim President Ettinger, for that warm introduction and for your deep commitment to sustainability here at the University of Minnesota and the implications that has across the state. As Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, I am continually inspired by the impactful work of our faculty, students, and of course, our alumni, who are leading change across sectors and making a tangible difference in communities here and across the world. At the Humphrey School, we pride ourselves on fostering interdisciplinary dialogue and collaboration. It is in this spirit that I am particularly thrilled to welcome Ms. Sanda Ojiambo, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact, back to campus. Ms. Ojiambo's dedication to sustainability and her commitment to mentoring students exemplifies the values we hold dear here at the Humphrey School and at the University of Minnesota. Following Ms. Ojiambo's keynote address, we have the privilege of engaging in a conversation with Professor Tricia Olson, the Stassen Chair of World Peace here at the Humphrey School in the Department of Political Science. Professor Olson's expertise in world peace and political science will undoubtedly provide valuable insights into the intersection of sustainability, policy, and global affairs. Let's just give Tricia a round of applause. She's down here. Their dialogue promises to enlighten and engage, offering nuanced analysis and thought-provoking questions that delve deeper into the challenges and opportunities surrounding sustainability advocacy and mobilization. I'd like to take a moment to highlight an exciting new initiative here at the university, the Sustainable Environmental, Social, and Governance Leadership Certificate, shorthand the Sustainability Leadership Certificate. Yes, that deserves a round of applause. This is jointly developed and sponsored by our school, as well as the Carlson School of Management and the Institute on the Environment. This graduate level program addresses the increasing demand for professionals adept at navigating today's complex climate, environmental, and social justice challenges. Starting in fall 2024, so this fall, if you are interested in applying, let us know. This multidisciplinary certificate will equip individuals with the essential skills they need to drive change in their organizations and our communities. Businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies are reckoning their role in addressing climate change, but many lack the expertise to take action. This certificate program is a strategic effort to bring students a competitive edge and provide them with the tools to be agents of change across industries. I'd like to thank all of those involved in bringing this certificate to life, and I know it will drive deep impact. Steve Kelly, our friends from the Carlson School, the Institute on the Environment, let's give them all a round of applause. And Diana Beck, who's here, she's our Assistant Dean for Grad Ed. If I didn't call her out for all of her hard work, I would be in trouble. So also Diana Beck, thank you. Now let's turn our attention to our honored guest, Miss Sanda Ojiambo. Appointed by United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres as Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact in April 2022, Ms. Ojiambo brings with her a wealth of expertise garnered over more than 2 decades in public, multilateral, and private sectors. For the past 2 years, she served as the CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, spearheading an ambitious new strategy to accelerate and scale the collective impact of business worldwide. Amidst the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, Ms. Ojiambo launched a visionary initiative to uphold the UN Global Compact's 10 principles and advance the Sustainable Development Goals through accountable companies and ecosystems that enable change. Her dedication to promoting strong business engagement with UN partners and delivering the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development exemplifies her unwavering commitment to creating a more sustainable and equitable world. Ms. Ojiambo's notable career includes serving as head of the Sustainable Business and Social Impact at Safaricom PIC in Kenya, as well as undertaking capacity development with CARE International and the United Nations Development Program in Somalia. Throughout her journey, she has cultivated and managed relationships with key stakeholders and led the implementation of impactful public-private partnership initiatives. Born and raised in Kenya, Sanda has over 20 years of experience across Africa and the globe, focused on sustainable development and sustainable business. Ms. Ojiambo holds a Master's of Arts in Public Policy, further underscoring her deep-rooted commitment to driving positive change through policy and advocacy, And I just want to emphasize that that degree is from the Humphrey School. Her academic journey, coupled with her Bachelor's of Arts in Economics and International Development, showcases her dedication to advancing sustainable development on a global scale. If you are not inspired, you absolutely will be. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Ms. Sanda Ojiambo, whose leadership and vision continue to inspire us in our shared journey toward a more sustainable future. Sanda Ojiambo.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much, Dr. Ettinger, as well as Dean Nisha, for such a warm, kind, and generous welcome. It's a true honor and a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Great to be back here and great to be back in Minneapolis. I have such fond memories of my days here at the University of Minnesota, the long winters, the balmy mosquito-filled summers, and student life in all its many facets, including being a teaching assistant in an economics class and gritting my teeth through a number of classes here. But it's truly heartwarming to also see some of my former professors here, Deborah Levinson, Sam Myers, and Raghi Assad, all who taught me about the discipline of getting to the root cause of issues, using data to robustly develop hypotheses, and of course, they taught me why public policy and policy analysis is so important for building a better world. It was not always easy, but I'm grateful, and it certainly is nerve-wracking if any of them are still in the room here right now. But for the more informal views of my years at the Humphrey School, happy to chat later once I'm done with the really important topic that we need to discuss. A little bit about myself. Deborah Levinson pulled out this picture today, so you can see me there. But that was my grad class in 97, 98. So who am I and how did I get here? So I consider myself a Kenyan and a global citizen by virtue of my education and my work and life experiences. The path to where I find myself today was definitely not linear or always thought out. But let me be vulnerable and reveal to you a childhood memory that remains with me to date. I must have been about 9 years old and in primary school or elementary school in Nairobi, Kenya, where I come from, when I first asked myself, why was it that some people had more than others? Or even, why some people had and others had absolutely none? And that question, in a variety of increasingly nuanced ways, has framed my life experience professionally and personally. The question, why is our world built like this, has been a constant voice in my mind. It has influenced and guided me through all my big life decisions. And the first of this big decision was, of course, education, and the direction that my education has taken thus far, from being a student of economics and international development to a student of public affairs. I joined a body of inquiry which continues to grow in an increasingly complex way, about how productive resources are generated and how decisions on the application of these resources are taken. Many have sought to inquire about policies. Can a policy be neutral? Can a policy be neutral and yet inclusive? Many have committed research and practice on how to sustain and redistribute productive resources. Thousands, if not millions, of hours of academic inquiry have been spent asking whether productive resources should trickle down or trickle across, and whether access to productive resources truly means access to a better quality of life. So I, along with many others, have sought to inquire how these productive resources can be sustained, regenerated, multiplied, and under what circumstances. The underlying questions have always been, as I said earlier, why is the world built like this, and why do inequalities exist? So education provided me with a path to grow and to inquire and to reflect as a person. And I'm truly grateful that I had this opportunity to advance this path of inquiry through my career in the nonprofit sector, as you heard, the private sector, and now the United Nations. The opportunity of inquiry and the opportunity to contribute towards making a difference certainly shape and ground me. And it's been an honor to have the opportunity to work in institutions that pursue that elusive question of inequality, and institutions that encourage systems to challenge themselves to address the social, economic, and political disruption that inequalities create. I'm also deeply reflective that a question that occurred to me as a young girl has been so hard to answer many years later. But then again, just look at the world around us. Never before has the world been so wealthy, so full of productive resources. It was estimated that the global GDP in 2023 was $105 trillion. And yet we live in times when the global public good is most challenged, when global inequality is at its most evident, and when global solidarity is at its lowest ebb. There's some staggering statistics to reflect on. There are over 160 million in child labor, 160 million children in child labor, excuse me. It'll take over 132 years to change the global gender gap, and the COVID pandemic pushed more than 100 million people into extreme poverty. There is no simple answer to why the world is like this, but there are many solutions to changing it. And I certainly think that policy, development, and economics are at the heart of these solutions. My career spanned vastly different sectors, as I said before, from the nonprofit world to large corporations, building ultimately to this role at the United Nations and at the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. And through it all, I've seen that the power of business in society goes far beyond simply providing jobs and income. So that's me and what brought me here. But before we kick off to the topic of today, I wanted to hear your thoughts on a question. So in this complex world of sustainability and emerging fields of business, should business drive policy or should policy drive business? What do you think? Because I think this is at the fundamental of many discourses. What comes first, good policy or good business? I'd love to hear just two thoughts from the room. Any takers? Shout it out.
You said something earlier, humanity should drive both.
Okay. You have like the cheat sheet here. Any thoughts from anybody else who I haven't already met? Business policy, what should come first?
Depends on the business.
Ooh, depends. I love that answer. I see a hand there.
Businesses can probably move faster and are more agile in a top-down policy process.
Good. So sometimes business moves faster, humanity, and it depends, which are all really great perspectives. And let me dive into the topic of today, and I'll share a little bit about business and what I think. So as you all know, the business landscape is fast changing, along with global realities. And just a glance at the headline tells us we're truly on shaky ground, locally, regionally, and globally. To start, half the world's population, 50 countries, will elect their leadership in 2024. Globally, as well as here in the United States, we're seeing increasing polarization and political instability. And at the same time, as we know, the world is facing a series of unprecedented crises. Violent conflicts are increasing in number around the world. Economic instability continues to complicate growth and recovery. And the world is literally boiling, exacerbating food and water insecurity and increasing migration. In fact, the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, reports that this March was the hottest March in history in a 10-month streak of highest ever temperature records since we started recording. So these interconnected crises are threatening both public and private sectors, policy and business. People are suffering and economies are losing billions. Governments around the world are fiscally challenged. None of this is new, but the severity has been building for decades as the world has struggled to continue to respond. There are four key drivers, I think, to the current times, and that demonstrate the yin and yang between policy and business. And I call them the 4 Cs: COVID, conflict, the cost of capital, and climate. But let me zoom in on climate, as climate and energy are significantly framing an ongoing global discourse around economic growth, equity, green jobs, social and economic governance transitions. Let's start with a walk back through history. So scientists first warned the United States Senate in 1988, okay, it might not be that far away, that the world was moving towards a new climate frontier, marked by stronger storms, heat waves, and droughts. Of course, we know that countless opportunities to act on this information were missed and are still, in fact, being missed. And then some of you may recall 2015, when 195 countries signed the Paris Agreement, the plan to limit global temperature and global warming to 1.5 degrees above industrial levels. The Paris Agreement was different from many others because companies joined governments in advocating for a strong deal. But the road to this collaboration was long and still sometimes remains complex. But today, the window is closing to keep global temperatures anywhere close to the 1.5-degree goal, and we're far off track to achieve the SDGs. Policy, business. In fact, we're losing ground on many of these critical development issues. Critical policy negotiations have focused on governments as the ambition piece and business as the action piece, a component in an effort to rally all the relevant parties. It was found that the forward-looking agenda or engagement of the private sector certainly helped bolster intergovernmental confidence and trust to finally reach the Paris Agreement after several years of talks. In the same year, the United Nations adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or what we call the SDGs, to address the world's greatest challenges by 2030. So goals on climate action, water, food security, on ending gender disparity and discrimination, providing quality education and protecting human rights, to name a few. Many ask, are these goals too many or too complex? Well, I see them as a set of interconnected goals. The first 4 goals, from poverty to education, represent areas where the public sector needs to invest further and lead perhaps the unfinished business of the Millennium Development Goals. From goals 5 to 14, from gender to life below water, represent significant opportunities for sizable investments by business and for robust public-private partnerships. Goals 16 to 17 on institutions and partnership represent the frameworks through which investment and partnerships should be governed. So, just like a car, you need everything to work together and in sync or in support of each other for progress on these goals. What the world has learned is, and they've learned the hard way, is that no one entity, including governments or the UN, can be expected to or can solve global crises alone. And these ongoing crises have also taught us that businesses cannot act independently of their environment. The organization that I lead, the UN Global Compact, works to build bridges between the United Nations, government, and the business community towards solving the world's biggest problems. And we have a set of 10 principles that we believe make businesses more resilient, more sustainable, more inclusive, and more competitive. And they're framed around 4 areas: human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. The UN Global Compact was formed in the year 2000 against the backdrop of big capital, recession, and rising inequalities, to put, as the Secretary General Kofi Annan said then, a human face to global markets. So to help companies progress on their sustainability journey, we provide a roadmap on the principles and support businesses to tackle and innovate around critical issues such as responsible business practices, employee rights, and living wage policies to decreasing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, amongst many others. We are headquartered in New York, and today we have more than 22,000 participating companies worldwide, with country networks in over 60 countries and regional hubs in Denmark, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates, Panama, Lagos, and China, all working in tandem to advance responsible business and sustainable development. In the United States, we have Network USA and 1,100 companies. Some of them headquartered include a number of Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota, such as Ecolab, 3M, Cargill, Carlson Capital Partners, and many others. And our work is based on the knowledge and the premise that when companies put longer-term sustainability over short-term profits, and it's a difficult decision, transformation is possible. But it's also just good for business. And we truly have seen firsthand that the business community is uniquely positioned to help advance the sustainable solutions that the world needs. So in September 2023, the United Nations did a stocktake of the progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. And the findings were stark. Only 15% of the global goals were on track, with a further 40% lagging behind. And the United Nations called for a re-energizing of efforts to drive progress towards the SDGs by all stakeholders: governments, the private sector, civil society, and the UN itself. At the Global Compact, we spoke to CEOs and business leaders to hear from them about where they thought business could have the greatest impact to drive momentum, influence policy positively, and drive collaboration on the SDGs. And most importantly, to re-engage business leaders in solving for those global problems. We call it Forward Faster. Please take a look at the screen.
automobile is a fad, a novelty. Horses are here to stay.
I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers.
Women cannot do men's work.
Sustainability is important, but we have more urgent issues.
History has taught us that the leaders who succeed are the ones who meet the needs of the future by moving forward.
To achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we need forward thinkers. Those who see the SDGs as a driver of growth, not reputation. Who are busy making progress, not just pledges. Who know sustainability is the future, not a trend.
Because right now, only 15% of the SDGs are on track for 2030. Some are even moving backwards. And the majority of businesses aren't setting bold enough targets.
Forward Faster is here to guide companies on the areas where they can make the biggest, fastest impact for 2030.
Because sustainable companies give us the best chance of achieving the SDGs. But we need you to take more ambitious action.
The people and planet of tomorrow are relying on the forward thinkers and doers of today. Don't fall behind the times. Move forward faster.
You think they're gonna do it?
Well, thank you. Nothing like hearing it from that generation. I think we can all agree that the leaders who are going to succeed in any field are those who can identify and meet the needs of the future today. But the truth also is that the future we want is quickly slipping out of our grasp. So to rescue that future, as the kids have said, we need forward thinkers and doers, bold private sector leaders committed to a new people-centered approach to business. And I've spoken about sustainability and the SDGs, but certainly many businesses, investors, and stakeholders would frame many of these issues around an ESG framework. So how does this all fit together? Because many people do ask. Incidentally, in 2004, the UN Global Compact did coin the concept of an ESG framework for businesses, and it was formed because investors were looking for a way to draw a link or see how to signal the link between sustainability and investment potential. We knew then that companies could increase their competitiveness and their value for shareholders, well now stakeholders, by committing to sustainable business practices. Almost 20 years later, ESG, as we know, is more relevant than ever for businesses. The Centre for Business and Economics Research in the UK found that from 2019 to 2022, companies with ESG strategies saw profit growth nearly 3 times higher than companies without them. But unfortunately, as I'm sure you all well know, political divisions intensify, particularly in the United States, and ESG's increasing centrality to the business agenda has resulted in the anti-woke backlash. But instead of abandoning ESG, we firmly believe that companies should be doubling down. Companies must replace virtue signaling with concrete ESG strategies and tangible deliveries that drive value and growth. And we know it works. And as you all know, millennials and Gen Zs are increasingly demanding that the businesses that they patronize address a wide range of sustainability and social issues. These generations are certainly shifting corporate culture faster and for the better. As always, there's still so much work to be done, and time is quickly running out. The business community can and must do better, which brings me to the following question that I've often thought about. How can businesses help solve the world's greatest challenges at the pace and the scale that the world needs? Harnessing this potential requires an integrated and sometimes seen as a radical way of doing business. It requires 3 things, and I'll talk about those more in depth. The first is collaboration between business, governments, and society. The second is increased accountability from companies. And the third is targeted finance and investment from the private sector. And first, let me talk about collaboration, because this may seem simple, but in reality, it is pretty complex, and I spoke about this earlier. We're in a fragile multilateral world with widening differences between North and South that reflect through politics, through economics, and through social development. Collaboration is challenged, but it is so necessary. We often speak about silos. We see them in planning, we see them in policy, we see them in business, we see them in financing, we see them in the public sector, we see them in the private sector. Perhaps we even see them in academia. But yet we know that the vexatious problems that we seek to solve require collaboration, in fact, radical collaboration. The type of collaboration we saw in the COVID pandemic, where the public and private sectors quickly realized the need for robust policy and incentives. The type of collaboration that saw companies that previously competed against each other in the market collaborating across technology, logistics, and inputs. Now, we know it didn't always work because we know that we failed to collaborate globally to ensure vaccine equity, but we did see some semblance of new types of collaborations emerge. We know that companies need more support from governments on sustainability targets and ambition. To speed up progress, governments need to level the playing field and create incentives for companies that are doing good. They need to create policy frameworks and more enabling environments for sustainable business. And we need to collaborate better and proactively. We see collaboration as the only way that we can solve today's problems, because governments are fiscally squeezed, and no one sector, no single industry can fill those gaps. But we also need collaboration, not only in times of heightened crisis, but we need it on a day-to-day basis to solve our problems as and when they emerge. Second, accountability. While many in the global business community are making progress towards sustainability, clearly there's a long way to go on transparency and accountability. We know that transparency and accountability are key to driving lasting change. There's been extensive work around creating and harmonizing corporate reporting standards in Europe and in North America. From the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD in Europe, to the SEC requirements here in the USA, and the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, efforts to grow compliance and regulation also exist across Asia, and awareness on reporting is building across the world. The interest in reporting and credibility is heightened, as is the fear of greenwashing and greenwashing. The UN Global Compact is not a reporting standard, but we have collaborated with many of these entities because in many instances, our normative frameworks form significant parts of their reporting frameworks. We run our work reporting platform, the Communication on Progress, and every year, companies are required to report annually on their progress through this platform. Incidentally, Moody's and Standard & Poor's factor in what they call a Global Compact Index in their own work. You saw Forward Faster a few minutes ago on the screen. And that was created to provide companies not only with ambition and guidance, but accountability on key sustainable issues. As you noted there, Forward Faster will focus on 5 key areas where we feel companies have an outsized impact: gender equality, climate action, living wage, finance and investment, and water resilience. We call these areas multipliers because they can accelerate progress across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And companies are challenged to take credible action and communicate their progress towards specific and measurable sustainability challenges. It's about creating an environment of accountability and ambition, ensuring that companies can turn rhetoric into action. Now, third, let me talk about sustainable finance. If we are to make progress on the sustainable solutions at the pace and the scale that the world needs, we need a level of financing that not only businesses can provide. We believe that there is ample capital in the world to provide the $5 to $7 trillion needed to achieve all of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, the market for sustainable financing and investment has been estimated at $31 trillion. However, much of this wealth lies in stranded assets and investments that do not advance sustainable development. To address these obstacles, some of the work that we're doing at the UN Global Compact through our Chief Financial Officer Coalition for the SDGs is that we aim to create a $10 trillion market for sustainable finance by 2030. The path ahead of us is clear. We need businesses to collaborate more, to be more accountable, and to target financing towards sustainable development. It won't be easy, but to advance sustainability solutions, we need bold private sector leaders willing to take risks and put people and planet at the center of organizational strategies and operations, and we need robust policy. How do we ensure that the next generation of business leaders is equipped to address global crises and create the world that we want. It brings me back to my own studies. I was inspired by the study of economics to think in new ways. There were so many angles to explore how economies grow and thrive. And one thing was clear. If we want to change the world that business is managed, we must change the way that business is taught. The world needs private sector leaders with knowledge, skills, and imagination to navigate some of these real-world roadblocks in a shifting sustainability landscape. We've surveyed chief executive officers from around the world, and the vast majority, 93% of them, tell us that they are facing 10 or more simultaneous challenges to their business at any point in time. And these CEOs point out that global issues that traditionally lie outside of the corporate sphere, such as climate change or geopolitics, are threatening their businesses and impacting customers and investors. The majority of these CEOs agree that sustainability is core to their role, but 90% of them report that employees lack the sustainability talent and skills needed for the future of work. And that truly is food for thought, both for us as the providers of talent, but certainly for CEOs as well. 2/3 of CEOs are committing resources to upskilling their workforce. But what if we could address this challenge before the students entered the job market? Something that I'm very excited about, an initiative that we call the Principles for Responsible Management Education, or PRIME, was created to help address this gap. Founded in 2007, PRIME helps business schools worldwide to provide future leaders with the skills needed to balance economic and sustainability goals. And by integrating the UN Sustainable Development Goals across business and education, including in curriculum development, research, and work-based learning, PRIME prepares students to address global needs. Along these lines, I'm really pleased to see the efforts that the University of Minnesota has made to integrate the SDGs into curriculum, discourse, and projects. Congratulations on all the work that you do in this area. So we have an opportunity to refresh our approach to business management education, to teach future business leaders how to lead with purpose, to solve global challenges with systems thinking, and to support holistic value creation, capacities that unfortunately ChatGPT cannot just provide. And so it's not enough for business education to simply teach students how to pursue profit for shareholders and comply with regulations and policy that sometimes lag behind current realities. It's not simply enough to provide information. We must, all of us, provide inspiration and purpose. We must work together to create the innovative, forward-thinking, and talented pool of business leaders that the world needs. And as I close, I hope I have demonstrated that we need multi-stakeholder and multilateral partnerships. We need policy and business together to address the current crises. We need radical collaborations across sectors to drive momentum. The private sector is certainly a key player across many roles, and we will continue to need robust enabling environments and incentives being directed in the right way. But before I go, just one last thing. And let me reflect and recommend one missing piece that I believe could perhaps solve at least 90% of our global ailments. It's called solidarity. And I've learned on my road through life that solidarity really can solve problems. And it might even be the answer to the question that took hold of me as a 9-year-old child. Thank you so much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just another warm welcome to Assistant Secretary General Sanda Ojiambo, please. So we are so pleased to welcome and proud to welcome you back to your alma mater. You talked about your childhood at the start of your talk, but I wonder if you could just share a little bit about what brought you to Humphrey and the ways in which your time here has really shaped how you think and how you approach global policy.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And, as was mentioned, I was keenly interested in addressing a question that I still reflect on to date. But when I finished my undergraduate studies in Montreal, I was clear that I wanted to look at the issue of policy and certainly see how policy would help me, one, advance my studies, but also I think deepen the interests that I had at a personal level. So I did do a search on policy schools, but I also looked for a school that was going to offer me an inclusive learning opportunity, that had some great professors, and actually, to be very practical, was going to offer me some great financial aid. And to be honest, I got all of that from the Humphrey School. And that was it. I got a great financial aid package. I had the opportunity to work with some greats like Sam Myers, Deborah and Raghi, and many others. And I found a great international community that was welcoming. We spent many hours in study group. We spent many hours exploring the city. I lived on Cedar Avenue at some point, and on 21st, I just saw that. And it was just a great learning opportunity. That was purely it. And I really want to thank the Humphrey for continuing to create such an inclusive, warm, and welcoming environment for students.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Again, it's a pleasure to have you back. So I wanted to pick up on one of the things that you highlighted in your talk, which is collaboration, kind of linked up to SDG 17. And when we think about global governance, one area of great interest of mine is how community leaders, business leaders, and policymakers really can work together. And I think your perspective is so unique because you've had very important roles in each of these sectors. And so I'm curious how you think about the various ways in which these actors can come together in solving complex and ongoing problems that we face globally.
So it is a complex one. I don't think I have the perfect solution, but I do think we have the perfect framework, and that's the Sustainable Development Goals. So, as a contrast to the MDGs, which I know are very public sector led, it was about government driving development. I think the call to action that was given in 2015 was about how the UN, government, private sector, and civil society could all come together to collaborate. And I think on the private sector piece, what made it perhaps most attractive, that it wasn't a call for private sector philanthropy or financing. It was a call to business to look at the SDGs as a business opportunity. And I think it's important to always say, even as we solve the world's problems, the incentives have to be in the right place. I don't really think we can, at this stage, continue to collaborate simply because of altruism or because it looks and feels good. I think we have to be very clear what the incentives are for various players and stakeholders around the table. But look, it's not easy. I mean, we see this globally. I talked about, climate talks are long and fractured. I think Raghi Asada told me he was at the Commission of Status of Women discussions in March last year, where we're at the stage where governments and stakeholders are literally taking apart agreed upon language on gender and some of the critical issues therein. So we're sliding back in many ways because I think, what we previously took as granted around what global solidarity meant is being challenged. But the world is fast changing, and that's key. I think the question is how quickly can we adapt? And how quickly can we bring all of the relevant stakeholders together? I honestly do not have the answer. I believe it's complex, but we see pockets of, as I said earlier, collaboration that really do work. I just want to call out one thing because I think academia is so important to this. And I feel increasingly in my discussions, academia is being called on as a neutral broker of information. The research work that you do is so important to advancing policy for governments. It's so important in advancing thinking on critical issues such as technology and AI. And I think it's really important to continue to partner with academia for some of that information that I think can really drive decision-making at many levels forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because I think it is complex, and I often think there's a lot of misunderstanding across these different sectors. I joke, I teach human rights classes, and students sort of think the corporate world is just full of impunity. Absolutely. And then you go and talk to MBA students, and they're taught from strategic management professors in finance that the world is a scary place and businesses may not last until tomorrow, right? It's a highly competitive, and so these two messages just really kind of miss one another, I think, sometimes. But I wanted to circle back to how you ended your talk, which is based on, thinking about solidarity. And I'm curious how we foster that, like in your own experience and given the challenges of collaboration and even that some of these agreed upon ideas are kind of being scaled back. How do you really foster solidarity around these issues?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting models that are developing, and it's interesting to watch both from a business as well as a sort of political and and global perspective. I think for me, solidarity is first just being able to empathize and understand what is going on, and really being in solidarity from a, just a human to human perspective. So I think the gentleman there that had the cheat sheet sort of heard me speak earlier about humanity. I don't think you can build solidarity without humanity. So even a business leader needs to think about, and it's great to see this in many developing and emerging economies, who exactly am I serving? Who is the humanity behind that customer, that supplier chain that I want to build, or those SMEs that I'm working with? Because when you see that, then you can do important things like consider, how do I price? How do I meet people's aspirations, even if they can only earn $1 or $2 a day? How do I support the growth of a small SME in my supply chain, or an employer, understanding they need a living wage, not just a minimum wage? How can I be at solidarity with the people with whom I serve? I think that's the first from a business perspective. The second is to understand, and we see this politically, a lot of regionalization around groupings. And it's great to see a lot of political goodwill and, yes, solidarity being built regionally. We see this through the BRICS. We see this obviously through the EU. We see this through renewed efforts on the African continent. It's great to have that regional solidarity. I think my preoccupation is how and when do we ensure that builds up to global solidarity, because that's what we're working towards. But perhaps humanity is at a time and point when we've had to go back and strengthen and rebuild our roots to be able to look forward. So I'm energized by where I see leaders meeting, because they're meeting more regionally, I think. We're hearing business leaders looking at how they can collaborate regionally more, but we've got to be able to build up back to that global solidarity again. But that's how I see it happening. I see it happening very locally and based around critical issues that make good sense for everybody and building up collectively to the global.
That's a helpful framework of thinking that through, I think. It's also interesting to me, I was in my research for this session, I realized that you accepted this position during COVID. And so I think a lot of, many people sort of rethought how they felt about their suppliers or their employees or, all of these communities that they address. And so maybe that was an opportunity as well to sort of rethink where those opportunities for solidarity exist.
Absolutely.
So the next question that I wanted to ask, I think one thing that often comes up in the classroom, speaking of academia, is that students struggle, and I struggle, and I'm asking you because I'm curious how you work through this struggle, about the difficulty in balancing incremental change versus the need for an entirely new model, one that's much kinder to people and the planet that we live on. And so I'm just curious how you think about that tension in general, but then more specifically in terms of the work that you're doing with the Global Compact, how you kind of navigate that there.
I did spend a lot of time talking about the global situation and probably painted a really dire situation around it. So
that's usually my job, by the way. So thank you.
So I do think that sometimes, yes, transformative change is needed. I think the system is definitely broken, whatever system it is, a political system, a business system, even sometimes community systems are broken. And we do need some big changes and big moves. I think I just maybe talk about two areas that I think are really most important. The first for me is the overall international financial architecture. I do believe that system is truly broken. And I think the systems that were set up in 1945 that really did not allow financing to flow in ways that were equitable, and now direct much needed resources right now to developing and emerging economies are certainly not helping us address some of the big issues that we need to. For me, I think that's one really big area to look at how we deploy that capital at scale, how we're able to empower developing and emerging economies to actually take charge of their own economic growth and transition is one very critical area. Radical transformation needed there. I think given the enormity of the climate and energy crises, we do definitely need to look at different business models. It's encouraging to see businesses who are members of the Global Compact and others really rethink and re-engineer the work that they do. We're far off track from keeping 1.5 alive. I think that's well noted. But we do really need to take a different look at how business runs and how it operates in light of the finite resources that we have. It's a bit of a balance. I don't always think that everything needs to be transformed. I think a lot of this is actually how we as human beings look at each other and what sort of change mindsets we can bring to being. So I'm not all for throwing everything up in the air. I just think there's two really big things that we need to address. One is finance, because of the macro level. I think it will allow us to solve a lot of the north-south divides that we see between developed and developing economies. And if resources go in the right place, we should be able to spur economic growth that matters for countries and economies. And certainly, as I said, on the climate and energy piece, because we need more renewables out there to be able to deliver for the world.
Oh, that's great. So I want to take the last couple of minutes that we have to really turn toward a couple of questions that I think many of our students in the audience might enjoy. So the first is, I listened to a bunch of podcasts you were on,
Okay.
and on one of them, I just thought this was wonderful. You said leadership doesn't happen in isolation. And I was curious how you built the village that you rely upon to become the leader that you are today.
I'm trying to remember which podcast that was. I love that you said you need a village, because it really is true. I don't think that one can lead, and I firmly believe leadership happens at so many levels. But I'll tell you who's in my village. And, first is my mom, because, she's absolutely incredible. She's a leader in her own right. As a politician, I think it runs through her blood. She's 87 and she will not give up, But, I think all of us hopefully can rely on some family level of community that continues to spur and to inspire. I love family and friends because they shape you and they ground you, and they sort of tell it to you as it is. And I think for me to be able to find that inspiration, I found that in my mom and a friendship group that I think really just keeps me inspired. But I really must thank actually all of the managers and leaders that I've had at work, who incidentally up until now have all been fantastic male allies. It's the first time in my world right now that I have a female boss. And I really just want to thank all of the male bosses that I have had, because many of them took a bet on me when most times I actually did not have the skills to sit in the positions that I did. And I shared with some in Milwaukee yesterday, just very lightly, and this is a true story. I walked into the wrong job interview for my first job. Actually, I walked into the wrong organization. But with confidence, and the backstory is simply I was sitting in the back of a cab, really trying to rehearse my resume. It was back in those days when a resume got you a job. And I was busy sort of cramming these things I wanted to say, and the cab driver turned into, I was looking for Care International that had a regional office on one side. So it had the Kenya office on one side and the regional office on the other side that had Somalia and South Sudan. And cab driver must have been left-brained and turned into the left. I saw the same logo. I walked in. And I said, well, hi, I'm here to talk to the boss. And I was really being cocky and confident, as you learn how to be when you graduate from the Humphrey School. So I went in and I said, they said, do you have an appointment? I said, no, but I really need to see the boss. Of course, these kind of stunts probably cannot work anymore right now. But I got in to speak to the boss and I said, well, hey, I'm here looking for a job. And he said, well, good, can you do X, Y, Z? My first real job, I wrote an emergency evacuation manual for staff working in Somalia and South Sudan. I had no skills, but Rick Henning was so kind as to take a bet on me. I was really surprised. I thought he was out of his mind when he said, come on Tuesday with your passport, because I knew I was in the Care Kenya office. But on Thursday, a week after I walked in by mistake, I was on a flight to Somalia and I started my career. And since then, Rick Henning and many others have taken a bet on me in many ways that has been absolutely significant. I just really also want to thank and acknowledge my bosses who have been incredible. I have the honor right now to work under the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, who's a formidable lady with such vision and clarity around what the sustainable developments can do to transform the world. So it's a true privilege to work with her as well. I'd say family and my bosses.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So the last question I had for you is that, we have a lot of young students in the audience, and I was curious what advice, maybe other than getting the address right or not, as the case
Yes.
may be, you might have for them as they embark on careers that really will advance causes that are dear to them.
Yeah. The world is obviously vastly different, but I think what I see, because I do interview a couple of people and work with a great team, and two of them are here, Stephanie and Christy over there, and I always try to pick, Christine, sorry, I always try to pay attention to the intergenerational differences and what matters. What I'd say first, actually, not so much to the students looking for jobs, is to employees. I'm sure there's many of you in the room here, which is, I think the world is vastly different, and we need to work at creating a workplace that is meaningful for people looking for jobs right now. And that means so many different things. I've just finished doing my employee sort of engagement, diversity, and inclusion survey. And one of the things that sticks out for me the most is employees are saying they are looking to simply feel like they matter. After a couple of years in isolation, people want to know that they matter. They don't want to be a cog in the wheel. They want to be able to enjoy flexibility in ways that perhaps we didn't think were appropriate for the workplace. So we need to be able to trust more. We need to be, if you want to look at accountability for work, look at it in many different ways, but also appreciate that technology and innovation have created a vastly different workplace and world of work. So to students and work, what I would say is, come into everything with as much of a multidisciplinary approach. The problems that we have to solve today, and I look at work as a place where we go to solve problems, and that keeps me excited, are so complex. So I think one of the key skills one needs to really bring into the workplace is how you collaborate. Because you could come into, and I talked about this earlier, policy from an economics perspective, from an anthropological perspective, from a business perspective, from a climate perspective, and all of those skills are probably needed to solve that one problem. So how do we collaborate around this stuff? How do you research to know where to find solutions, I think is really important. And then finally for me is I think there's so much that can and should be done around technology. I don't know it all. I know there's great advances that are happening, but it'll be really interesting to see how we can use technology to really efficiently crack through all that data that we have. We've never had so much more data in our lives, but how can we use it more efficiently to solve problems in the right way? Because we've got to be able to move forward faster in ways that make sense. And so there's lots of exciting things to do in the workplace, but I think flexible approach, using technology more, and creating a great workplace should make it so much better for students now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I just, in closing, and this time went by way too quickly, but I just want to thank the organizers who put this on, to Assistant Secretary General Sanda Ojiambo and her staff, Stephanie and Christine, thank you so much. I also just want to note that, I'm continually inspired by Humphrey's mission, which is that we educate, engage, and equip leaders and communities to discover solutions that advance the common good in our diverse world. And I think everything we talked about today relates back to those issues. I also want to congratulate Humphrey and Carlson in the Sustainability Leadership Certificate. I guarantee there were silos that had to be overcome to get that going. But in closing, I just wanted to reflect, as a child, you said you asked, why is the world built like this? And I think you're right, there is no simple answer. But I think most of us in the room feel a lot better about the world we live in, knowing we have you at the helm of such an important organization. And we are incredibly proud to call you one of ours, and we look forward to your next visit.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.